Welcome friends to another r/entitled parents video. Did you know that it's statistically proven that 100% of people who hit the like and subscribe button down below are not entitled? That said, our first story of the day is by Who Am I Even To? Entitled tourist mom throws a hissy fit over foreign paper sheet for her child at a restaurant. I live in Sweden, and before I changed my career to IT, I took a tour around restaurant town as a waiter at a restaurant. During summers, my city gets a lot of tourists, mostly Germans, Norwegians, and Danes, but Brits and Americans aren't unheard of. This day, I was waiting this American family of three, the mother, the father, and the son, who was around 9 or 10. I immediately thought that this was going to be a doozy because the mother immediately referred to me in English, and neither asked, "Do you speak English?" in either English or Swedish. With that said, a lot of us do speak English. I think the number sits around at 94 to 95%, but it's still polite to ask as there's a few who don't. They ordered their drinks and food and I made my way back to the kitchen to give them the order. On the way back, I brought them their utensils. We also have these paper sheets with riddles, labyrinths, some basic math questions with fruit and vegetables, and animals to color for the children who visit us, together with some crayons. The riddles and wordplays are obviously in Swedish, but foreign kids can still enjoy the maze and coloring the animals. I gave the kid the sheet, explained to him that they won't understand the riddles, but he can still have fun with the rest, and he seemed happy to have something to do. I then left to wait the other tables. This is where the fun, or should I say entitlement, begins. The mother calls me to their table and I go there and ask what's wrong. I say, "How can I help you?" She says, "Excuse me, this sheet is in Swedish and my son can't understand. We want one in English." I say, "I'm sorry, but these are the only ones we have. But if you want, I can translate the riddles for your son and help him solve it." She says, "No, I want my son to improve his reading and this must be in English. Why are they in Swedish? We don't understand that." I say, "I'm sorry, but as we're in Sweden, most, if not all material is aimed first and foremost towards a Swedish audience. Your son can still enjoy more than half of the activities as they're self-explanatory." She says, "This is discrimination. Not everybody speaks your heathen language. I want another waiter." I wave towards my colleague who's more seasoned and experienced, and colleague says, "Hi, how can I help?" The entitled mother says, "This person refuses to give my son this paper in English. He doesn't understand what's written." The colleague says, "Sorry, we only have these in Swedish. But there's a bookstore in the next block that I know sells these kinds of riddles and questions in English, if you want to buy him something to entertain himself." She says, "We shouldn't have to. The customer service of this place is awful. Why are they even in Swedish if everybody speaks English here?" The funny thing is that while this was happening, the son just sat there, happily coloring the tiger. He's completely in his own world and seems to be having a good time. The rest of the night was fairly uneventful, but she gave me the evil stare every time I served them. She didn't give any tip either, which is no big deal as we don't really have a tipping culture here, but it was still funny as she would probably freak out about that if she was the waitress. The son managed to finish about 85% of the stuff on the paper, only leaving out the parts he couldn't understand, so I would say that he was satisfied. I feel like on top of all the obvious stuff here where you're in Sweden, so it should be no surprise that almost all materials would be in Swedish, I think there's also the simple fact that how much of those papers do kids actually finish while dining in at a restaurant? Do you think that the average kid, if given a paper with 4 or 5 different activities on it, would actually even get through all the activities to make it worth the point of arguing about? Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Lastroids. Guy breaks into my car, dies, and somehow it's my fault. I live in the US, but I'm an immigrant from the Philippines. This happened 4 to 5 years ago when I went back home alone for a month-long vacation. I rented a house with no parking spot for a month, and my cousin let me borrow her rarely used car that I had to park on the street. I was only there for a month, so I was almost always out and about meeting friends and relatives to make the most of my stay. One day at noon, I walked out to the car to find the door open and a strange guy sprawled over the driver and front seat, puke spread all over the dashboard, and what looked like a severe nosebleed. I was angry at first, but when I realized the guy had no pulse and wasn't breathing, I administered first aid and called an ambulance and the cops. I also needed to call a mechanic because the car battery was dead. I later found out that the car alarm went off until the battery died. Slept through the alarm. I'm a heavy sleeper. So I had a trashed car to wash, a battery to replace, and a police office to visit. Fun. The guy was pronounced dead upon arrival, and initial findings suspected illicit drug use. The cops suspected the guy to be a junkie trying to steal the car, but had OD'd in the middle of it. Apparently, the place I rented was surrounded by slums and known as a hive for illicit drug use and sales. A sad story to be sure. This being the Philippines, I was adverse to pressing charges. It's a slow as freak justice system, and who would I even press charges to? And at that point, I kind of felt bad for the guy and I just chalked it all up as a bad experience. 4 days later, at around 8 p.m., an older couple claiming to be the parents of the guy who died, with several tanids, basically community police, came for a visit. At first I thought they were there to apologize or make amends in behalf of their son, but lo and behold, they were asking me for money. I was irritated at first, but then I thought money must really be tight. So I tried to be understanding and polite, but it was still a firm no. I understand that a guy died, but it was through no fault of my own. After that, all heck broke loose. The previous calm mother cried as loudly as possible and tried to scratch me. The father tried to grab my shirt and wanted to punch me. Thankfully, the tanids were impartial and herded them away from me, all the while they were insinuating I had something to do with their son dying. I was a bit shaken and genuinely just wanted to get away from there, but I made the mistake of putting that off until the next day. At around midnight, I was awoken to the sound of breaking glass and metal being pounded. They made enough of a racket to wake me up. About 4 to 5 guys were destroying the car and spewing all the profanities they could muster. I called the cops and went to stay at my cousin's place. In the end, I had to stay 2 more weeks more than I planned. I helped the cops try to investigate my case and paid for the damage incurred on the car. To add insult to injury, I never got my deposit on the house rental back. The house wasn't even damaged or anything. I understand it's a very traumatic experience, and I can definitely imagine in a situation like that where you're grieving and you're trying to find an explanation for it, you might latch onto the idea that maybe the person who owned the car had something to do with it. But I just don't really know what they were expecting to get out of trying to coerce OP into giving them money. The facts and details of the entire situation were all laid out. OP wasn't liable in any way for what happened, as awful as it was. Our next story is by Winterstar Gamer. No, you do not get to call one of my cashiers the R word and get away with it. A little backstory, I work as a service manager at a pretty popular Midwestern grocery store. I've been a service manager for a couple months now, but have worked for the store itself for about 3 years. I've worked in quite a few departments during my time at this store, so I know a lot of the employees very well. One of my duties as a service manager is to watch the front end and overlook the cashiers and courtesy clerks, make sure customers are happy, do overrides, you know the deal. Now, while I do have some cashiers and courtesy clerks that are on the spectrum, I don't treat them any different than any other employee, and they all appreciate this. I know their strengths and what they're capable of and push them to do their best. With that being said, I protect my employees. I care about them deeply, and if a customer even dares to raise their voice at them, I'm there to shut the customer down and take them away from the employee. I don't care if you yell at me, but do not yell at my employees. Most of them are high school students. Now to the story. This one day, it was fairly busy in the store. I had most of my registers open, and lines were flowing pretty smoothly. I had one of my courtesy clerks covering a break on one of the registers. Let's call her Casey. Now, Casey's on the spectrum, and she's a very sweet and smart high schooler. She operates a register very well, and can show up all the other courtesy clerks with going outside for carts. She is arguably one of my most hard-working employees. Now, sometimes she has moments where she messes up, such as double scanning an item, entering something wrong, but this is something every cashier does, honestly. I see her light blinking, so I come over to help her, and am greeted by a very angry customer and her daughter. Casey says, "Hey OP, I scanned this twice, can you void it please?" It's important to note that anything over $5 needs a manager approval to void. It's annoying, but it's how our store works. I smile and nod and quickly do the void. It honestly takes like 6 seconds to void an item and enter my numbers for the override, not that long at all. But that didn't stop this customer from huffing and puffing that she had to wait an extra 7 seconds for a void. I back away from the register, not thinking much about it since this is sadly a normal thing that we have to deal with. I walk over to the customer service to ask Jack, who's working the counter that day, a question when the following happened. Casey had finished the transaction and handed the receipt to the customer, who snatched it out of her hand before she pushed her cart away aggressively. I don't know if the woman thought she was quiet enough or far away enough to be out of earshot, but I heard her clear as day as this woman told her daughter, "I can't believe they let freaking R words on the register like her." I look in horror as I saw Casey's expression fall from her normal bubbly self to sadness. Oh heck no. I proceed to shove my schedule at Jack and walk my now very angry butt up to this customer. Although this happened about 2 months ago, I'll never forget this conversation. "Ma'am, I'd like to ask you something," I say, gesturing her to step out of the way. The woman and her daughter proceed to step out of the way with their cart, the mother still looking very annoyed. "What do you want?" I say, "I don't know if you thought you were being sneaky or smart or just plain rude just a moment ago, but what you just did is unacceptable. I'll have you know that Casey is in fact on the spectrum, and both her and myself heard what you just said. You do not have the right to come in here and call one of my workers the R word and then proceed to walk out without any consequences. Who do you think you are thinking you can talk to me like that?" The woman honestly looks shocked at the fact that I just called her out. I keep my composure and continue speaking. "I'll have you know that girl you just talked bad about is an extremely kind and hardworking employee. Honestly, she's arguably one of my best employees. Just because she made a small mistake such as ringing up an item twice does not give you the permission to treat her as if she's any lower than you." At this point, the mother's stuttering and is red in the face, her daughter smirking and is trying to suppress a laugh as if she's actually glad her mom's being called out. "How about this? How old is your daughter there?" More stuttering, I turn my attention to the daughter. "Hun, how old are you?" The daughter smiles at me, knowing where this is going, says 17. I say, 17, huh? Fun fact. I turn my attention back to the mother. That's the same age as the girl you just said that nasty word about. Now here's an image I want you to imagine. Imagine your daughter worked here as a cashier like Casey. Imagine she accidentally messes up and double scans something, a common mistake that happens quite often. And in return, the customer your daughter's checking out proceeds to call her an R word for making a simple mistake. How would you feel? Silence. The mother just stares at me, defeat in her eyes. How would you feel? More silence. I proceed to ask, you would feel mad, wouldn't you? Would you be upset that someone called your daughter that? A small nod is the only response I get. Now I'm going to give you two options. You can either go and apologize to Casey for what you said and move on with your life, or you can leave and I will personally ensure that you are placed on our store ban list. Choose wisely. I stare at her for a moment before the woman sheepishly goes back to Casey's register and gives a half-butt apology before dragging her daughter out of the store. I haven't seen this woman again, but I did see her daughter who came back the following week to apologize about her mom and thank me for what I did. Apparently this girl went to school with Casey and knew that she was on the spectrum, but wasn't in the position to stand up to her mom. Now I did almost get in trouble for this. One of the store managers was nearby and heard the tail end of the conversation, and afterwards pulled me aside to tear me a new one. Once I explained the whole story to her, she seemed a little more at ease with it, but still wasn't happy that I called the customer out like that. We never got a formal customer complaint for it, so we don't think the customer submitted anything about it. I mean, bottom line, OP is the boss that everybody wants to work for, somebody that's got your back. In retail, I imagine you have a lot of customers who just plain suck to serve. Would be more than happy to call you nasty words and walk all over you. It's nice to know that when people act like that, your boss has your back. I mean, the simple fact that the store manager took them aside and said that they weren't happy that OP called the customer out like that, even after OP explained the circumstances. That's what's disappointing about this story. Not really the fact that it even happened in the first place. It's just protect the people that do good work for you, right? Nobody deserves to get treated like that just because they made a simple mistake. If there's some kind of job like this, it's public facing and there's actually nothing worth getting worked up about, people should remain civil both in conduct and vocabulary. And our final story of the day is by No More Cinnamon, entitled Kid Tried to Steal My Puppy. I have an 11-week-old purebred corgi with his tail still attached. This will be important later. Tail docking is still legal in the US. I'm not an advocate unless deemed necessary. He's been my bread and butter through some tough times. I would gladly take a bullet for him to get those kisses. He doesn't have all of his shots yet and he needs a lot of exercise. I live in an apartment without a yard, so I walk him around my building a few times without a leash since he never leaves my side. This time I had him on a leash and we walked to collect the Bezos mail. This was his first time exploring out this far. I wanted to make sure he was kept close and out of the way. On the way to the leasing office, I didn't see anyone around and he was having a ball exploring the new places. When we made it to the parcel pending place, a package up for tenants, I collected my package and started the trip home. A family drives up in swimming gear for the pool. I thought nothing of it. I picked up my puppy to carry him with my package in the other arm. Immediately, the kid rushes to me and the pup. He couldn't have been more than 4 to 5 years old. I lifted my leg to try and stop the kid and explained, "Please keep your distance. There's a pandemic and my puppy needs space to keep him safe." The kid didn't listen and approached closer. I yelled out louder, "No, back up," to where the mom heard me this time. The mom rushed her way over, demanding I apologize for yelling at his boy and to let her son pet my husky puppy. I corrected her that my pup is a corgi who hasn't had his boosters and to keep him safe to please back up. I just wanted to go home. The mom got all up in my face and tried to yank the pup from my arm. I could hear him yapping in fear, so I had a knee-jerk reaction to pull him closer and turn around. "Back off, you're scaring him. If you get closer again, I will use defensive force to protect myself and my puppy. You and your child need to back off and leave me alone." The mom went into hysterics and the kid started crying. The boy tried to reach up and grab his tail and pulled. He was yanked through my arm and dropped to the ground. I screamed as loud as I could at both of them and tried to pick him up. I panicked with my keys and sprayed the mom with pepper spray. They both started screaming their heads off. I picked up my puppy and ran home. I did a check on my puppy. He's shaken up quite a bit. I changed my clothes and held him close to soothe him. I plan to only keep him around the building from now on. I mean, I don't know what was going on with this Karen and her kid, but OP was definitely right in the moment that they needed to back up, give OP their space, and get out of their face. Once the mom got all up in their face, the kid starts grabbing the dog. I'm sorry, but if you get pepper sprayed, you're the one that stayed in close proximity despite given ample warnings. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So of all these stories I've read today, which is your favorite and why? Let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't yet, if you could like and subscribe, that would mean a lot to me. Whatever you do, whether it's liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, all of it helps grow this channel and I appreciate the heck out of it. So until next time, I'll see you all tomorrow with some more stories.